hypnosis is a tool that helps your thinking mind to take a break.
What's one misconception about hypnosis?
I don't make my clients quack like a duck in session. There's a big difference between stage hypnosis and therapeutic approach to hypnosis. It's not me doing something to you. It's me facilitating you doing something with yourself.
In TV, and they just go to sleep and then do whatever I want. And it's just like, that is scary.
And my mentor made a mistake with me, and she only did anger with me. And I
What happened?
spiraled. This is what the time technique has also helped me with, is really get to a place where my emotions come up. The love, the loss, the grief, all of that stuff, well, it's still here. That's why the tears are here, but it doesn't take over any of it, because NLP is very much based on language, body language, or verbal language. We're looking at all of the ways that you experience the world through your own senses.
Hi, welcome back to Bold Moves, the podcast where we empower women to be bold, be brave, and be you. I'm Ayu, your host, and I just want you to know that I've learned new things today from my guest speaker. We talked a lot about hypnosis therapy and the misconceptions around it. We talk a lot about NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming that helps you to get through some major things in life, some major life events or breakthrough or transitions. And we also talked a lot about how to process emotions, the anger, sadness, shame, and guilt. And I'm sure you will learn so much about this today. You will learn about emotions, about hypnosis, therapy, and NLP. And I want you to, and it's actually it opens my mind about it. It was not what I thought it was, and I want you to think the same. So without further ado, let's welcome Rebecca. Thank you so much for doing this with me today. I really appreciate your time to do this with me, Rebecca. And I know it's early for you there, 6 a.m. I think it was.
Yes, it is.
All right. Before we go into deep about your coaching, about the approach and everything, just for the context for the audience, can you briefly tell us about your coaching, like who is it for and your approach, and just briefly, just for the context?
So I work largely as a hypnotherapist and a mediator. And I support individuals and couples going through a moment of crisis in their lives. That seems to be the people that I support the most. They're in a tough transition. They're feeling the tension between how they feel internally and how they're living their lives. And I'm not doing the things that I want to do with my time and my energy. And I use hypnosis as my primary tool, although I'm also trained and certified in neuro-linguistic programming, which is another device that focuses on words and language patterns and how we picture and imagine the world. And it's a really interesting foundation to support people with, to really bring on some beautiful transformation.
Yeah, so that is a beautiful thing to do. It's like you are the support for people that is actually in a transition. They wanted to do something, but they're not sure. So it's just like you are giving them the support through your approach. Am I correct?
I'm the teammate. I'm there to support. I'm there to facilitate. I'm a bit of a guide as well, because I provide structure and some tools that people can take into their lives to practice for themselves. I like to make myself redundant to my clients, because my goal is that you can live your life without needing constant mental health support.
You mentioned that your experience with NLP didn't just change your mental health, right? You said in the story, it also played a role in your pregnancy journey. How did that unfold? How did that?
So neuro-linguistic programming is founded on the ideas presented by two key experts who worked polar opposite methodologies, but both were highly effective. And one was a family counselor, and she would ask these very specific questions in therapy that would allow the people to really come out and express themselves and work through their problems. And her success rate was crazy. And the other pole was a hypnotist,
Mhm.
and Milton Erickson is basically the father of conversational hypnosis. And he brought on major transformation in himself by learning how to model himself after others and finding all of these methodologies. He became a doctor. He has a beautiful, amazing story. And he, in using hypnosis, there are there's a lot of magic that can be done in a way that's very different from typical therapy,
Yeah.
which is why I use it a lot more, although I do use the family counseling aspect with my mediation clients.
Mhm.
And hypnosis is a tool that helps your thinking mind to take a break, to just
To take a break.
go somewhere else. And so I mean, there was already something about using NLP and hypnosis to place a baby into my timeline, as it were, which is the workshop that I did with my mentor. It wasn't specifically for that she was hosting it, but that was the goal that I set for myself. 6 weeks before I got a positive pregnancy test.
6 weeks before.
6 weeks. Yeah. And that was completely unexpected because my husband and it was
Of course.
like 3 weeks later that we were like, should we try again? Okay, let's give it a try. And apparently it immediately took because I was pregnant right away. Which compared
That's
to
amazing.
my first pregnancy, it took us 6 months. So I will put at least some of that on this work that I was doing on just kind of getting my life ready mentally as well as physically at the time.
I'm so interested in this because this is very new. And when your brain gets into new information, you kind of like, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of questions. I'm gonna do it. Because yeah, I've been trying with my husband as well for like 9 years. Imagine that. I don't know,
Wow.
yeah, that long. And 8 years because we're married for 9. I've never heard this. I mean, I've heard hypnosis and all the benefits before, but never really get into it. And no one ever said to me that hypnosis is actually to helping your mind to take a break, which
It's
a big
yeah.
understanding for me right now. Oh, and I see it in a different way. And while we're talking about that hypnosis, what's one misconception about hypnosis that you know that
That
is
well,
didn't
I don't make my clients quack like a duck in session. There's a big difference between stage hypnosis and a more therapeutic approach to hypnosis. And
that
it's
is more stage hypnosis, like
well, yeah, it's
some
a performance. And then also what we talk about is it's not me doing something to you. It's me facilitating you doing something with yourself.
all right. Take note, everyone. It's different from the hypnosis that we saw on TV whatsoever. It's therapy hypnosis. It's different from performance one. Okay, now I understand. It's what you understand about hypnosis before. When I was a kid, there's like some program in TV, and they just go to sleep and then do whatever I want, and it's just like that is scary. But
Yeah.
then I started to learn a little bit more because I spoke to someone who also does a hypnosis therapy as well, and then you came to my life explaining this, and it's becoming more and more. I don't know how to say that. I'm becoming more open to it because before it was like, what is that? What is it? Something new.
Yeah.
So your brain kind of like resistant to it because of the experience that you saw hypnosis before. But then now, especially when you say for your mind to take a break, it changes my perspective. And thank you for that. See, you give us a lot of lessons, and that's why I love this. So how about for example, um so before you got pregnant again, the therapy that you did was just hypnosis and NLP, or
Yeah, it's I miscarried in November 2021. And
Mhm.
then I had my own whole grief journey in that time because it was early December before my body was done recovering from the miscarriage because you bleed for quite a while after you lose a baby. And my mental health was not the best, but it was stabilizing. And my husband and I decided to treat ourselves to a 5 week long adventure in Europe, visiting my family in Switzerland and
Beautiful.
traveling around and on a road trip that was a beautiful change of scenery and getting out of my head and enjoying some other stuff, including like having to switch languages for the first time in a while, which was very
That's
fun
another
for me.
therapy, isn't it? Nature therapy.
Yeah. And February, I did the workshop with my mentor and placed my baby into my future and was saying that like by May I was going to be pregnant. We were going to be doing it. I did a lot of purging of my house cuz being pregnant even for just a few weeks brought a lot of perspective to my husband and I about
Sure.
things that we needed to change. I was working as a set lighting technician in the film industry at the time. And that is part of the reason why I experienced the miscarriage because the days are long. And I had a day where I did 20,000 steps a day and I was hauling like 40 to 80 pounds. So like 20 to 40 kilos of gear on my shoulders. And at the end of the day, I did one thing too many and I felt the tension in my body of like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And a few days later, the miscarriage started. Um,
Oh,
and that was it was a major reframe for me. And my husband and I worked through the grief together. He supported me, he held me. I allowed myself to have my feelings, and that's really what I needed. And then once there was more space for conversation, we made a plan and we said, well, Rebecca needs a new career because this isn't the one for pregnancy. We need our house to be better set up for a child, so we're going to have to do some work. I was signed up for my first NLP training because I was going to pivot into that. And we were like, should we try? Okay, sure, let's try. And that's all it took, apparently. And
amazing.
my daughter was born in December of 2022, and my mentor was in the room once again with me. Um,
Beautiful story.
and where a lot of people may be familiar with the Mongan technique in hypnobabies, where there's a lot of self hypnosis and guided support that you can do in preparation for, and where people who facilitate it will typically be much more hands off and just make sure to hold the frame and advocate for you. My mentor was there actively keeping me in trance for the whole 6 hours of my active labor. She was holding me, she was reminding me to breathe and having I didn't have the birth story that I was hoping to have. I wanted to give birth at home.
Mhm.
I wanted to give birth naturally and unfortunately that didn't happen, so I ended up with an induction at 42 weeks and having my mentor in the room with me, keeping me in hypnosis is I put it at least as the only reason why I didn't need an epidural and the only reason why I didn't graduate to a C-section because the pain in the experience, I remember it was intense for me,
Of
but I
course.
don't remember
Mhm.
feeling the pain because my mentor was there just reminding
Yeah,
me
she
to
was.
breathe.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And again, your story is just something new for me. A lot of things that I've learned from you in this session, and I want to thank you for sharing it.
Let's do just a little thought experiment because it's a good example of this.
Mhm. Yeah.
Think about something that made you really happy.
Hmm.
So when you think about it, something comes up, right? There's a picture that comes to mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
And see, your eyes just move to the side. So you just look somewhere to find that picture in your mind. So now I can already guess that the picture for you is off to the side. And is it in color or is it black and white?
Is it black? It's black and white.
Is it moving or is it still?
It's still.
Are you in it? Or do you see, like, no? And when you think about it, immediately your feelings change, right?
First. Yeah.
So neurolinguistic programming is going to play with this. It's going to play with these pictures, sounds, and feelings that you create in your own mind. Because what we could do, for example, is take a really sad thought and make it a happy one by just using the same frame that you gave me for your happy thought. And I didn't go into great detail here because there's a lot more questions that I can ask to really create the detailed picture. And what's really fascinating is that you can literally move these images that you come up with. And depending on where you place them, you're moving the way that you're relating to them in your own mind's eye. And that's a big part of what NLP does. This is the most exaggerated version of it because NLP is very much based on language, whether it's body language or verbal language. We're
Okay.
looking at all of the ways that you experience the world through your own senses.
All right. That is very interesting because you asked the question because you realized that I started to close my eyes and you actually immediately said, "Look, you're picturing something now." And I did. What makes you pivoting to this kind of like line of work? What there must be a story that you had that made you feel like, okay, I'm gonna help people this way. Do you mind to share that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. I've had on and off depression. I was put in therapy when I was 11 because I was not dealing with the reality of my life. I had been moved from the United States to Switzerland by my mother when I was 7 because my mother remarried someone out of the US and she took us. And I wasn't really given a choice in the matter. And by the time that I was 11, my relationship with my father was deteriorating. Puberty and all of that stuff, school was not going well for me, and I was not dealing with life, and I was having big emotional, uncontrolled outbursts
Mhm.
because I was out of control, and none of the adults in my close circle were supporting me in a way that helped. And from 11 and up, sorry, it's naughty. From
Okay.
11 and up, I was in and out of therapy. And therapy, talk therapy supported me through my stepfather's cancer and passing when I was 16. It helped me facilitate some of the very hard codependency things that were
Yeah.
between my mother and me. And it's what also really empowered me to start divorcing myself from that codependency with her because my mother could not let it go. But I was
Mhm.
the one who
Mhm.
was starting to really do the work and reframe our relationship. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I was getting frustrated with how slow I was moving with talk therapy. And I had some beautiful moments of support with it, but it wasn't what
You're just
I
frustrated. Yeah.
know. And by my mid 20s, I had left Switzerland. I was traveling full time for a while, and I was introduced to Vipassana meditation. And I attended several of those courses, and they blew my mind already to start. And then in my late 20s, when I finally settled down in Atlanta, Georgia, I started working at a small alternative school, and my boss introduced me once again because I'd heard about it, but this was the most hands on discussion I had with anyone about neurolinguistic programming and
Mhm.
hypnosis. And she was going through programs and trainings and stuff. And she was like, "Hey, can I try something on you?" And I was like, "Sure," because I like to try new things and I like to help my friends. And she did a technique called a time technique or a timeline technique, depending on what program you'll look at.
I'm taking.
And it's about reframing your relationship to old emotions, old anger that still informs your reactions today, old sadness.
Past.
Yes, like anger that you felt when you were very young, sadness that you felt when you were a teenager, fear that you may have even experienced from an ancestor or in your mother's womb or while she was delivering you, for all that it matters. And when we did it, a lot of old memories came up around
Oh.
anger, around fear, around things with my father, because I have a very difficult relationship with him. And it released it. And by the time that we completed it, because it took us a long time to complete because life got in the way for the both of us, it took us about 10 months to complete the technique, where I now do it,
Is
the
in
whole
10 months.
thing. It took us 10 months. I do it with my clients. We do it in 3 sessions at most. And I try to
Oh,
keep it in under a month if my clients agree with me.
not 10
Um,
months.
Not 10 months. It shouldn't be 10 months. But because it took so long, it blew my mind and allowed me the time to really experience how I was moving into every new emotion that I was releasing. Because there's a very specific structure to the timeline technique, and there's a specific order in which you're supposed to work through the emotions. And you start with anger, and then you do sadness,
Mhm.
and then you do fear and hurt and guilt and shame. And you do anger and sadness. You have to do them together, because once you let go of anger, then you don't have the barrier to protect.
Oh, yeah.
And my mentor made a mistake with me because I was one of her first clients, and she only did anger with me. And
Oh,
I
what happened?
spiraled. I spiraled.
When you say spiral, it's like the feeling stuck within you, or how do you?
It,
Is
once the anger was gone, I started to get lost in thoughts that were very depressive. And we started in September of 2020, and by late November, I was dealing with pretty dark ideation. I was considering leaving my spouse. I was considering dropping everything in my life and just leaving again, like I had done a few years earlier in Switzerland. And there was really a strong drive to escape my reality when I started. And then we finally met up a few months later, and then we released sadness and fear, and all kinds of things around men came up for me and my relationship and the fear that there was about like perceived violence and such. And then it took us a few months to see each other again because my mentor was also going through her own life events.
yeah,
And I spiraled into shame after we did sadness and fear. The hurt for me was very small, but shame, I had a full shame spiral for months on end. And there came a point where it got so bad that I would pester my mentor into seeing me again when I knew that she had a very full life. And eventually we released everything. And by the time that we made it to the end of this release of emotion, of these old attachments,
Mhm.
it's not the emotion itself, it's the way that I relate to them. And turning these old wounds, these old things that were pulling me downward in the way that I live today, it transformed them into signals, because that's what emotions actually are. You feel something, it's a signal about something is going on between the outer and the inner world that's not in alignment.
That's not in
And
line.
and when when you can recognize the emotion as a signal, you can free yourself from the burden of, oh, my father did this to me, so now I'm going to react like this towards someone else. My father, my father washed his hands of his children when we moved to Switzerland. I now was convinced I was having panic attacks over my husband leaving me in the same way.
Mhm. Oh
And
my,
and yeah, and it's those things. It's your childhood trauma definitely plays a part in how you live your life today, you know?
yes,
But
definitely.
time technique transformed that for me in a much more positive and constructive way. It released these old things. It released the fear that my father was abandoning me, and it released the fear that my spouse would let me go now because of the same reasons, at least. It made a lot of space for me to be able to say, oh, I'm having emotions and I need to take a moment to just let them pass before I let them speak for me.
Yeah.
And where I used to have a lot of defensiveness, a lot of self-loathing, and that those would be the first things that would come out of my mouth in a conversation. Now there's more space for me to be like, how do I want to react to this? How do I want to be in this moment? And then when the emotion comes up, when I get angry now, because I still get angry,
Of
it
course.
comes up, it comes out, and then it's gone.
So it
And then
helps you to understand more about emotions right now?
a client once described it like emotional spring cleaning. And I really, really like that description.
I like that too. I like that too. And when you mentioned the anger, sadness, and hurt and shame, I started to going back, of course, to my past, my childhood, and everything. And it's actually making me realize that I still carry some of those right now. I still carry some of the, especially anger. Um,
Mm,
so it's something when you mention that, I feel like, whoa, yes. And I still think I carry some of that from the childhood, from my past. And after anger, the second one for me is shame, which,
mm.
like you said, we carry like whole bags of shame from childhood until we're probably adult. And
It's cultural and it's very female at the same time, is
yeah,
it?
because I believe I carry some of that. I believe, and I think everyone, even the
We all
audience
do.
watching this, we all carry some of the stuff that we had in the past, either shame, sadness, hurt, anger, all of that emotions. And it doesn't have to be necessarily negative, right? It's not
Mm.
positive, negative. It's just part of
Yeah.
emotions. And I love the way you explain it now, that you have time to react into your emotions instead of just, this is how I feel, that's what's gonna happen, that's what I'm gonna say, that's what's gonna happen, even in an argument or when you are interacting with other people. That's very interesting. You make me feel like I want to do the work.
It's no, it's been I was blown away by it. I had no idea what I was signing up for when my mentor offered to do this on me. And by the end of it, I felt transformed. I really did. I felt like I had done enough work to really step into this next phase of my life. And it was just a few months later that I became pregnant with my daughter.
Mm.
Actually, that I became pregnant the first time, and I lost that baby at 6 weeks. And then a few months later, did another NLP hypnosis little workshop with my mentor, and not long after that, became pregnant again.
So it helps you to process the whole emotions that you had. It's
Yes, I mean, and it helped me acknowledge the loss when I experienced it. I I was able to much sooner because miscarriage is it takes a while. The
Yeah.
body miscarries, and then the recovery time can take several weeks because you're still going through the same postpartum healing in your body,
Mhm.
even if
True.
you're not bringing the child with you home. And in that time, I lost my baby a week before my birthday, and my husband took me on a weekend getaway for to celebrate and also just to make space for me. And in that weekend, he held me and he let me cry it out. I'm emotional just thinking about it.
Oh, oh my God. Look, thank you so much for sharing that vulnerable story of you. And I really appreciate that. And I'm sure, oh, Rebecca,
No, it's the emotion comes up
no, it's, of course, it's not.
because I'm very connected to my emotion. I'm a very sensitive individual, and it's not easy to parse through the way that you feel sometimes.
No,
But for
it's not
me,
easy.
this is what the time technique has also helped me with, is really get to a place where my emotions come up. The the love, the loss, the grief, all of that stuff, well, it's still here. That's why the tears are here, but
Yeah.
I'm okay. even if I'm crying, even if the sadness still lives inside of me, it doesn't take over anymore.
Oh, but thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sure that the audience or anyone who's listening, they feel it. And a lot of people, they carry some of their past and story that not many people know. And you sharing this to the world, it's kind of like make them not look, I'm not alone. Like emotions is something that we need to work on, we need to deal with. And what you mentioned about this, probably it's helpful for them. That's why, and even 15 minutes we're talking, I learned a lot about that, and I could relate in my own experience. That's the beauty of speaking to someone that understands this emotions and all of this that you've been through, because I feel connected. Not in a way that your experience to your experience, but I feel connected that, oh yeah, I've had that anger, that emotion, that shame that I carried that probably is still with me. And you mentioned that it's just something beautiful, and I love this already. So yeah, I remember your story about depression, and I remember your story also about traveling to different places and learning different culture, and you growing up in Switzerland and you working in New York and then traveled the world. I think you mentioned about Brazil or something, or Palestine or something like that,
Yeah,
and
both.
learned awesome culture. What experience stuck with you? Which one? I mean, what were some defining moments for you in your personal growth? Because I believe you're traveling and
Yeah.
meeting different culture open the whole new perspective of your world.
I from a travel and culture standpoint, I had a very, very rich upbringing. I am American and Brazilian by passport,
Oh.
and I was raised in Switzerland. So I am, by my Brazilian mother and my third culture kid stepfather, I am by definition what you would call a third culture kid,
Mhm.
which means that we're raised outside of the norms of, yeah, we're raised within multiple cultures, and there's not one specific identifier that works for us as a label. Like, even if I'm American and Brazilian, I'm kind of Swiss, but not really.
Yes, because you spend quite some time in
Yeah,
Switzerland as well.
17 years. Yeah. So I went to Brazil to connect with my mother's roots because my family was originally from Eastern Europe, and they escaped during the Jewish pogroms and escaping the Cossacks and stuff because they were Jewish. And they traveled over to North and South America. On my father's side, North America; on my mother's side, South America. And
Mhm.
Brazil was just a very interesting country for me. Even as a child, I was more interested in Brazil than my mom was willing to share with me because she didn't have a very happy memory of the country. Brazil was amazing. It got me in connection with spirituality. I grew very attached to the Afro-Brazilian faith of Umbanda because I have a family member who actually practices, and then I I rolled into Vipassana. I rolled into Sivananda ashram. It's these are There are too many experiences. It's hard to say just one.
Those were, I believe, those were incredible. And it shapes you to be you right now. Part of traveling, because I love traveling as well, and it shapes you. It opens your mind and your understanding about the world itself.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
my husband is from South America, from Colombia, and then I've been to Brazil as well. And then, yeah, of course, it's very different culture,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it opens a new part of your brain. I think it's understanding different culture, understanding people, and they are very warm as well in South America. So I love that. Then that's
Yeah.
incredible. Parents of you was traveling, and as a third culture kid is awesome. So before we wrap up, for someone who might be struggling, whether with mental health, whether with personal growth or major life changes, like you said, miscarriage and all that, what's your message to them? Or maybe one practical tool that they can try to make it probably easier, if you want to share something, anything for them.
Yeah, so just like that little NLP exercise that we did together, what you can do now is just close your eyes. And this is my invitation to all of my clients in my session. Close your eyes, take a deep breath in. Just get in touch with how your body feels. Get back in touch with yourself. That's what this is. And focus on how safe looks, sounds, and feels like. Pull up a picture of deep, profound safety. Look at it. Is it black and white? Is it in color? Are there any smells? Are there any sounds? Are there any sensations that you can attach to it? Where are those sensations inside of your body? How would you describe them if you could put some words on them? And just take a moment to really connect with this picture, sound, and feeling of safety that you have inside of yourself. And the more you can connect with that, the more you're going to be able to respond to the rest of your life from a place of feeling deeply safe internally and trusting yourself to respond from that space rather than the space of reactiveness and fear and anger and overwhelm.
That's wonderful, and I thank you for it. I think that would be helpful for the audience or anyone who's watching that might be struggling. And that's another new technique that I've learned today. Because when you ask black and white or colored, I know the answers because I really pictured it. And the smell, when you mentioned that just before, yes, I've had it. And yeah, I think that we should do more of that. It makes me more, when you say about happy picture and everything, it makes me calmer in a way. And when you say, where do you feel it? And I feel it somewhere in here. And it's just like awareness of my body. It's different from meditation, but also in a way it's similar, but more specific.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yeah, these are, in so many ways, these can be experienced as guided meditations. There are so many, like, I use hypnosis in a lot of different ways. I have a number of clients who really benefit from being walked down the path of hypnosis and into trance. And then I have some other clients will just do like that and they're in and they're down and then just get to the work that we're trying to get to together.
that's amazing. So, Rebecca, thank you so much for today. I've learned so much about hypnosis as tool to take your mind off, take a break of your mind. I learned a lot about NLP. I learned a lot about the time technique that you had before, not 10 months, but the benefits of those the approach that you do, and it opens my mind. Because I didn't know about this before. That's why I agreed. Let's just do the session with you because I want to know more about that. And thank you so much for your time today. I hope you enjoy this as well. And yeah, thank you so much
Thank you
for
for
that.
having me.